looking forward to welcome Natalia, Thomas, Stefan, and Dominik. Please come and have a seat. Don't be shy.
I'm pretty shy of Sabine. Why?
So let's maybe start with the lady on the panel. So Natalia is head of Burda Bootcamp and founder of the FitTech Summit, which is the first conference in Europe with as focus this fitness technology, digital health, and active lifestyle. Natalia will probably provide her insights about community and how to support startups in the long run. Next to Natalia, we have Stefan, who is the founder and CEO of Mindshine, the personal training app for your mind, which he created in 2018. Prior to this, Stefan, you gained expertise in consulting at Deloitte, in venture capital at ProSieben with Seven Venture, as well as an entrepreneurial experience at Freeletics, where you were responsible for the digital products. Next to Stefan, we have Thomas. Thomas is principal at Burda Principal Investments in London, so he's coming actually outside of our circle and ecosystem in Munich and can give us the perspective of the different city and country. Prior to Burda, you were at HIG Capital, which is another private equity growth fund focusing on internet-centric and also tech-driven businesses. At Burda now you are focusing on digital health and well-being. You will provide us with your investment perspective. And last but not least, Dominik Pförringer. And I never know how to pronounce actually the Dr. Med in German. So Dr. Medical,
Yeah.
Dominik Pförringer, who is a specialist in orthopedics and trauma surgery at the TU University Hospital and also his own practice in Munich. Dominik, you regularly also organize conferences. You're usually at my seat moderating. That might be a change to be on the panel. But you also support startups and numerous professionals in the healthcare segment with due diligence and other consulting services. So you will provide us with more of the digital health and digital medicine perspective from also an operator perspective, the doctor. I would like to know now who is in the audience. So can I have a little bit of a hands up for those who are entrepreneurs? Oh, that's quite good.
Oh.
And any in the fitness industry, healthcare, or well-being industry? Entrepreneur or corporates? That's quite good. Any actual corporates in that sector? Okay, any corporates at all? Okay, so we have a very huge representation of actually entrepreneur and founders here. Great, so that's just to give us a little bit of a perspective of who is listening to this. So my first question to you guys, and I maybe also start again with the lady, is to give me a little bit of sense on how you came across fitness tech, e-health. How did you actually fall into that segment? What was interesting for you, maybe, Natalia?
Well, that's a good question. When I was 7 years old, and my grandpa asked me what I want to be when I grow up, I told him, well, I want to be a track and field athlete. Like, I didn't know what it means that at that time, and I did start with track and field athletics 7 years later, and I never broke any record. I also never doped, although I come from Russia, so you know it might be a difficult field. And then I understood that through your body, you can really shape your character in a way which is not possible in, you know, just by doing some business, right? So that's actually the first starting point for my fitness sort of career in the space. And when I came to Germany 10 years ago, because I'm Russian originally, I noticed that I started to eat like large portions of German food, and you know how big they can be. And
you forgot the potatoes.
Right, but lots of potatoes, and at the same time working out less and less. So when I came back home 8 months later, my mom, who is always like, you know, wants to give me a lot of food so that the kid feels good, was like, Natalia, no, maybe you should a little bit less. I was like, okay, so now it's the tipping point to get started to take care of my body. So, and gradually noticed that like time passed by, I started to work with Burda, and I started to work as personal assistant of Burda. And one day I just noticed that there's lots of people with these strange things like trackers around, and everybody's counting their calories and steps. And like I was like looking around, like looking at things and talking to people, and nobody knew where I could get more information on that. So gradually I came to understand that there's no event platform or just no platform where you can get informed on these topics and understand where the industry is going and if these things are bullshit or not. So that's basically how it got started. It got started with FitTech Summit. It started when I was 7.
Long story. Which edition is that now? Is that the second time, third time?
So we are moving into the third round, 2020.
Perfect. Stefan, how did you start into the fitness world, or more the mindfulness world in your case?
Yeah, I'm trying to give a short answer on this. So, I also come from. Yeah, no, I do come from sports. I played basketball for more than 15 years until kind of my back would not let me play anymore. So, and then my studies kind of ended, and I started like, hey, studying in Munich, like economics, what do you do? So you try out consulting, and you were like, and then you try out venture capital, and at least for me it was like still, and then for the first time I managed to like combine my passions of like building products and actually working in the sports industry at Freeletics, and I realized with how much passion you can go to work, and like for me this was like okay, I have to always have to be in this area when working, and while being at Freeletics I also had the idea for Mindshine, because we were exploring a lot of, so the bigger vision of Freeletics was how people can become their greatest version, and our answer at that time at Freeletics was like, yeah, to become physically fit, but we always knew that like physical fitness is only like one side of the coin and mental fitness is the other. But since, as many of you know, like Freeletics was quite a success story, and so there was never actually enough time to focus on the mental side while the physical side was so successful. And so I decided to carve out this part of the business and do my own thing and started Mindshine.
Perfect, and we'll talk a little bit more deeper about the Mindshine app. Thomas.
So I don't think I have such a personal story as you guys do. I think for us, taking kind of the investor perspective, healthcare, big industry. As an investor, what you look for big industries. Then you look for so healthcare, 3.7 trillion industry for global fitness and digital health. So for us, as an investor, that's key. Then the other things we look for industries that have big inefficiencies. Healthcare has been one where it has been a laggard in terms of embracing technology. So for us, that's perfect, right? We look at inefficiencies. How can digital solutions really kind of build efficiencies and take costs out and improve the system? So perfect for that. So it ticks that box. And then lastly, kind of, from the pipeline perspective, I mean, the industry as a whole in terms of VC deals is growing. So healthcare, in terms of deals, is going to have one of the record years this year. And with that, the largest portion, a third of that, or 33% of that, is going to be digital health. So for us, that as an investor, makes us say, we really want to understand digital health better. And then I think, Benita covered a lot of the health things. So from Burda's perspective, and naturally, given that the corporate and the parent does so much, at some point Martin and Christian pretty much kicked us and said, how come everyone is doing it and we're not doing it? So I kind of put my hand up and said, look, I want to carve out my niche. And so we started that. And the first kind of wave was the FitTech, so we're a sponsor of the FitTech. We started that and sponsored them financially, but then also we're part of a breakfast panel where we gave some kind of insights of how the market is moving. And that deep dive kind of helped us inform where we look. And then now kind of digital health is the next wave where we're looking into it, and we have a lot of pipeline coming through. So we're kind of building a deep dive as well. And so, I guess the personal story is looking for my segment and, love fitness and sports as well. So that's how I kind of got involved with it.
So interesting. So market size, check. Very high demand, check.
Yeah.
Efficiency, checked. And then personal interest.
Yeah, exactly.
Dream job. So Dominik, for you it was a bit more natural, coming out of more of a medical studies. Why did you get interested into kind of expanding this area of your studies with more like advising startups, getting more innovation into that field?
Well, thank you for the question. First of all, I have zero to do with fitness or sports or athletics or anything like that. But I have the health angle to it all. And I think it comes out of a long history as well, because I tend to get bored quite quickly. So after medical school, when I started my medical training, I was after 3 years, this cannot be everything here. Come on, this cable car is going too slow. So I said, we need to change pace a little bit. So I decided, as you did, to join one of the most entrepreneurial business schools in Europe. I went to Fontainebleau and got what changed my mind a lot, and that's a lot of mind changing in my setup, and got all that entrepreneurial spirit. So when coming back from business school, I said I want to be with a consulting firm. I was for 2 years with Bain & Company, and saw high efficiency, high degree of technologization, and of very effective industries. Then I said after 2 years, well, PowerPoint is nice, and so is Excel, and PowerPoint is also nice, but Excel is also nice.
I didn't ask the question if there were any consultants in the room. So.
No, but I said for myself, this cannot have been the entire train, so this cable car is going into a too boring direction, at a high speed, but too boring of a direction. So I said, okay, let's combine all of what I learned, and let's go back to medicine. Then I figured out that a lot of what I had learned earlier, both in business school as well as in the consulting world, was lacking in medicine. And then my interest in startups grew, my interest in digital medicine grew, and all of a sudden I found myself in the role of advising companies on that, because I had a business degree and a medical degree, and I got more and more involved into that. And then I said, okay, this is the kind of roller coaster I want to be on, and that's where I got stuck, sort of.
I got stuck. So looking at this roller coaster and looking at what's happening in the FitTech, in the e-health or health tech, in the wellness or well-being. I mean, I'm putting pretty much a lot of different sectors in the same bucket. Borders are getting slimmer and slimmer, I would say, around these segments. We see a lot of different FitTech apps being popular. We see a lot of gyms popping up with like memberships, pay as you go. We see a lot of wearables, IoT solutions. Where do you think this is going? Like maybe first to Thomas and then Natalia. Like where do you see the key trends of these sectors when you talk to startups and when you see innovation?
So I think you said it. We're lumping global fitness, and then we're lumping digital health. So different trends that we see. So in the first wave, when we looked at kind of global fitness, the trends that we saw, community fitness models, which was really pioneered by Strava, Runtastic. So really these, and also Freeletics, I think in Germany is an amazing example of community business models that managed to do. The reason those were successful was because they managed to take the online and the offline together. So they built pretty much an omni-channel experience where you had kind of the online community that was built in the app, and people, kind of the gamification element, people going against each other. And then also, I guess, for Freeletics, the clear example that you probably know is, people then started offline meeting in parks and doing all those things. So I think community fitness models are huge. Then I guess the other thing is on demand is really growing. So we have kind of these, tonal mirror, which are exercises that you so home fitness on demand that you do. And Peloton just IPO'd this year, which is a really big example of kind of taking some hardware and building a subscription business on top of it. So I think that's where tech investors are looking. Okay, can you do something interesting when people have less time and do that in other homes? So I think those Peloton, as I mentioned, I think Swift is one with. I think we spoke about that on the biking. That kind of takes a similar angle with virtual reality. So I think there's a lot of companies in that space. In the digital health space, the trends are really around consumerization of mental health. So we have Calm, Headspace, really doing those things, raised massive rounds, unicorns in that space. I think on-demand care is growing, so telehealth is a huge thing. Babylon, AI, so telehealth, even with the new laws, is a big thing. So telemedicine, I think, is very interesting. And I think with on-demand, at the end of the day, if you think about it, most industries like mobility now, we have on-demand. Cars coming to you 10 years ago when we started. If you would have said to someone, I want a car, a taxi ride away, people would have said, okay, you want a private driver. Now it's very common. So I think the healthcare space is moving in that space as well, because at the end of the day, why would you in the healthcare space have kind of very unlocalized, not on-demand care and sit in a waiting room? That's very 20th century. So I think those trends are really driving, and then there's drug development, all those things as well. So some of the trends across those two different.
I think you covered it all. That's how
I think we can call it today and just go get some food. Thank you, Tommy. Well, there's really not really much left to add, but I think that the topic of community and like personal touch is getting way more important. So the age of like standalone apps for me is over, because there's just I see no way where they can defend their business, right? At the same time, we see that people get more and more disconnected through social media and digitization, which means, of course, they do want to get connected in a different way. So in that case, community comes into play again, and where like Freeletics was so successful also because they got this community model where they just got people together physically in one spot, right? At the same time, the connected fitness equipment and connected fitness in general is really a really interesting market. So we know that this market is going to reach like around $1 billion by 2023, and where we say like we're speaking about Tonal, which is sort of a fitness mirror, or about Peloton, which just had an IPO with over 8 billion valuation, or also about like things where you start to create a combination of services, hardware, software, and content. Like, just when we look at Peloton, they don't define themselves as a hardware company, right? There's been lots of competitors in the space with live fitness and technogym and stuff like that, who all define themselves as hardware companies, and at the same time there comes in Tonal, which invests heavily in content production. So they have the streaming studio in New York with around like 40 classes a day, right? And through content, they get high engagement rates, high gamification rates, and higher connections across their members, which also means that they have higher stickiness, right? And on the other hand, what we see is that companies start to work together across the value chain. Like recently, Lululemon, who knows Lululemon? It's sports retail, right? So they invested in Miro, which is basically just sort of a mirror hanging on the wall with your personal virtual trainer. And the point is that on the first site, they have different types of business models and types of customers.
So a few words. What do you think about prevention as the new medicine?
Prevention is great in general, but like I think this adds on to my point. What I would want to say is, at the end of the day, we're speaking about humans, and usually, if you don't have pain, you hardly get your ass up. So it's all about behavior change and intrinsic motivation. And also speaking, relating to the fitness scene, like. I think like the discussion is too much around like what's the next fitness trend, what's the next workout trend, and whatever it is. But then people are starting it, but they're not continuing it. But then the question should be rather like, what is getting in the way between the people and the desired behavior, like working out or training the mind, and building products that are actually taking out these hurdles along the way. And at the end of the day, these are the great products. Because, as you said, Peloton, they don't have the best bikes. They have the best experience that keep people engaged and stick with it for a long time, and then have effects. So for me, it's like progress is intensity over time, and if you take out the time of the equation, it's zero. So that's how I think about it.
That brings me to my next topic, actually, which is engagement and retention for all these startups that we get presented to, all these apps that you could have on your smartphone. How do you get people to remain active, to not churn? What's the kind of retention mechanism that you're working at with Mindshine? How do you make them fulfill that habit of training their mind?
So actually, I'm just thinking of a short answer to this question, because at the end of the day, it's about behavioral change. So you're looking a lot into behavioral sciences and behavioral psychology, habit formation and stuff, and so on and so forth. But I like to see it as some sort of as an onion, and in the core is the training experience. So for us at Mindshine, we try that each and every workout leaves you behind with a emotional high. So because like an emotional high at the end of each training is the best motivation to start the next training. So that's like one point, starting at the product. And if you got like your product right, that people actually feel that it works, then the next layer would be like give them inspiring and motivating content, so they always have like a nudge, because people tend to fall back into old patterns. So you have to remind them and inspire them and communicate the benefits. So that's kind of the next layer. And if you then put like community and like gamification on top, then you kind of nailed it. But all of this is worth nothing if like the core, the product, is not providing a good solution to a relevant problem. So you have to, at the end of the day, know your users, know their pain points, and then build the experience around it.
And so, Thomas, how do you look at this from an investor perspective? What are the type of metrics that would actually measure this type of engagement, this type of retention?
So I think retention is a pretty clear one, right? So retention rates, and you look at, churn, which is kind of the inverse of that. So we just look at it on a 3-month cohort basis, on a 6-month cohort basis, and 12 months. And I think, just simple numbers, right? I think best in class, if after 6 months only 50% are still using your product, then that's not great. So I think, we look at that. If I look at, Headspace and Calm from what's reported, we didn't ever see the numbers, but I mean, it's like 80% retention after a 12-month cohort. So that's super strong, and you're clearly proving that this product has, kind of a need for the consumer.
Actually, Peloton, I looked at the numbers, 95% retention rate after 12 months.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that is spectacular, right?
And the gym members traditionally, 82% go to the gym less than 1 time a week.
Yeah.
And 22% stopped after 6 months, their membership.
Yeah. And also Livongo, I think you mentioned the thing with the kind of patch for glucose levels that measures. Livongo, which has been one of the most celebrated IPOs this year in kind of the diabetes space in the US, their retention rates are over 90%, which is why the stock market loves them and why the IPO has actually worked. And so that's one clear one. I think that in terms of the other ones, I mean, it becomes more difficult in terms of gamification, but I mean, you have DAOs to MAUs, which is daily active users, to monthly active users, as in before you asked me, to the acronym. So you have to kind of figure out, is it a daily active use case, is it a weekly active use case? So we look at those metrics and benchmarks. So really what you guys did in consulting, both of our bosses are consultants, so they're always like, okay, how does this benchmark with the competitors? We do that. And then I think one thing that we kind of learned also, and I was speaking to Natalia about this before, is that I genuinely believe that really the omni-channel experience is a very, very important part in kind of these in these solutions, in FitTech solutions, because at the end of the day, we humans are not solitary. We don't just want to do this on our own. We want to be part of the community, and you can't just do this at home, do the workout exercises at home. So that's why I think, for me, the example, personally, if I look at Freeletics, if I look at Strava, all these people also, I mean, in Freeletics' case, they met offline. Beat 81, which just raised a massive round in the FitTech space, you basically go into a park, they have a leaderboard, and we're all competing against each other. So it kind of drives instincts around, A, we love to compete. Most people love to compete. We love to benchmark each other, and then lastly, we want to be part of the community, because health and fitness shouldn't just be something that you do yourself at home. So I think those are things that we thought about.
And with Mindshine, what's your community-driven approach?
So it's yet to be being built. So it's definitely on our roadmap. So we, speaking of my onion model, so we focused on the core first, on the product, but we are now exploring on how we can bring the online users offline. So we are thinking of like group workshop types of things. So actually we have tested one of these events here on a smaller scale during the Startup Safari, where we hosted here at Burda a small group coaching session, and actually the experience was super nice. So we will definitely be looking into that over the next years. Mindshine retreats could be a possibility, and yeah, trying to bring first community online together and then offline, obviously. Yeah.
But I still have a concern about, we get really targeted by quite a lot of different apps, right? Different solutions that can be for your well-being, for your mindfulness, for your workout. It could be a self-development book. It could be a coaching session. At the end of the all of this, take a little bit of the share, like a little bit of share of the wallet of the consumer. How do you differentiate yourself? And maybe Natalia, you've seen quite a lot of startups, at the FitTech Summit. What are the things that you see work, and what are the things where like in terms of entrepreneurs and community-driven, you were talking about, how do you actually help the startups in that FitTech Summit?
I think Tommy has seen way more startups than myself. And I have to say that the guys from Burda Principal Investments also help us to select the startups, because we want the highest quality startups at the summit. So they look with their experienced eyes at the startups and just say, kill, kill, kill. Okay, that might be a good one. Kill, kill, kill. Okay, that might be a good one. Just dump them. But in terms of how we help startups, I think Stefan is one of the best examples for that. So when we usually select like 50 startups to exhibit at the FitTech Summit. And we are quite selective in that, and we also look at different areas that the startups cover. So we like to combine, we're sort of stage agnostic, so we combine early stage startups and later stage startups, and we also like to combine different types of products that they produce, like from hardware to software. And for us, it's important that every startup that is exhibiting the FitTech Summit gets out of the summit and says to themselves, yes, that was the right time invest and the right monetary investment, because that can really push us forward. So what we do is sort of, a mini acceleration program within one day, where we don't run like acceleration programs. I don't believe in acceleration programs, because I think that the best startups will find their way around, and they will not give up shares early along the journey. But what we do is sort of, a mini acceleration program where they can meet relevant people in advance. They can talk to the relevant international companies and international founders and investors. And they also have the chance, like 10 of these 50 startups can take part in the pitch competition. Who of you has actually been to the FitTech Summit before? Anyone? Okay, do you remember the pitch competition? So you know that that's really survival of the fittest. Yeah. For all of you, it's sort of, we also do it in a way with a burger challenge, or you got to bike for, the second founder has to bike for the time, and so on. So for us, it's, you have to practice what you preach. And in that case, fitness is a very grateful topic, because you can do so many things around it, right? All people sitting in the audience are having fun, but also on stage have to sweat. Sorry about that, guys, but that's the rule of the game. So to go back to the question, the winning startups get the possibility to get in touch with Burda Principal Investment guys, which I think is a huge value, first of all. They get the possibility to use our co-working space for a couple of months, and we'll also do our best to connect them to relevant Burda assets. Because what you might not know is that Burda is actually Germany's biggest health publisher. So we've just acquired NetDoctor, and we also run the My Life magazine, which is present in 10,000 pharmacies in Germany, which is more than the half of the market. And what also do, we have across all the publications that Burda has, which is like Focus magazine, like Fit for Fun, which is sort of obvious, but also like Freundin or Elle or something else. So Burda reaches around 30 million people in Germany with high health awareness, right? So that's a number. That's actually like over 30% of the population. And that gives us the opportunity to see where we can help the startups to get into media, if they have the right product or the right narrative, where we can help them with some coaching, like, where they have the real need for coaching. And it's also about word of mouth and about our own recommendations. So that's the way we do that. We don't have any structured program.
Cool, that's a lot of support from the corporate. We see a lot of corporate innovation programs out of kind of incumbents. We see a lot of the incumbents actually acquiring startups to kind of remain into the game. Thomas, when you say kill, kill, kill on all the startups of Natalia.
A lot of the startups that we pick for the pitch competition are too early, so we get involved in the Series B companies that are growing at 2x, 3x year on year, and so I think that's one of the reasons why we pass. And I think the biggest reason why we pass on a lot of things, because they're just too early. So that's one in terms of calibrating. I think the other thing, and you asked it in terms of, I guess in your question, was around there's so many in the market and share of wallet. I think what we've realized, and this is a learning we've actually had from the fashion world, where Burda has a lot of experience, is that if your main paid channel to get users is Facebook or social media paid, that's not so attractive to us. I think one of the things that we have come to realize is that if you're in social paid, it just becomes more expensive over time. And what we think is the greatest proof of concept is that if you have organic installs, which is a big part of your user subscription driving. So if you have over 40 to 50%, user installs organic, that's something that we like. If it's, you're spending 60 to 70% in the early days through social, and that's how you're gaining users, and thereby, we look at unit economics. That's kind of, the term that we say, look, how much are you actually spending, and what's the net margin on it. So if we see that you're spending most of your money on Facebook channels, and so that's one reason why we're saying, look, we think that that's not the greatest way to acquire users, and we look for other channels. And I think that content is the greatest driver there that can come through other ways. So I think spoken audio is something that we have realized actually is bigger than people expect for signups. So things like that. So I think we look at, and maybe some of the reasons why we kill some startups.
So if I come back to the previous question earlier, so user growth, engagement metrics,
retention,
organic traffic versus acquired traffic, all these are elements or KPI that you would look into.
Yeah, those
to
are
make
obviously
a good investment.
Exactly. So all these things together,
community-driven element as well.
Exactly, community-driven, retention, core, churn. I think those are the biggest ones that we looked at in terms of engagement. And at the end of the day, also one thing we look at is team. Team, I think, is critically important in digital health. For me, has kind of been the learning as I looked at it versus other industries, because it's so difficult actually in the B2C space to kind of win customers who are actually paying. And I think in the B2C space, so a lot of digital health companies seem to have pivoted to B2B because there's just bigger pockets of pool. And probably something that you can elaborate why I think the digital health space is a bit more complicated than the other sectors. But in the team side of it, I think what we've realized is that versus other sectors, you need to have people who understand the different stakeholders, insurers, doctors, who are actually the gatekeepers in this world where the big profit pools are. So in the team, for instance, and I'm looking at Livongo, which is the IPO in kind of glucose. The CEO is not kind of a young entrepreneur, but he has built, he's 58 or something, 60. He has experience selling into pharma companies. He understands how to sell to the different payers. I think on the flip side though, also in Germany, we have a company called Kaya Health, which is an awesome digital therapeutics company. The founders have the typical kind of profile. They sold Foodora very successfully, but very quickly when they hired kind of their team, they brought medical doctors, senior medical doctors into the team. They brought AI specialists and senior pharma salespeople. So I think that's another one. Team is very important to us in digital health.
What do you think, Dominik, when you're conducting due diligences on digital health startups, what are the things that you're looking at?
Well, first I need to elaborate what Tom just said. Team. If I like the team, I still test the team. Now seriously, whether they work well, and then also sort of what we learned before in investment strategies, like would you like to have 3 Harvard people or 1 Harvard guy, 1 Stanford guy, 1 INSEAD guy? You clearly want the blend, and that's also what you need, basically a multifaceted team, a team that is interdisciplinary, where you have the medical doctor on board, the analyst on board, and maybe someone who's from the IT background. That's also what we see at Unternehmertum when we're fostering startups. So the more diverse the backgrounds of the team members are, yet still when they found out that they're working well together. And then what I would also underline basically from what you said is understanding the healthcare market. The willingness to pay of an average patient, be he rich or poor, for something in his health sector in Germany is 0 cents. People who are intensely rich would rather invest on nicer rims for their winter tires on their housekeeper's car than invest into a better hip implant, because the neighbor doesn't see the hip implant. And I'm not making a joke, of course I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the willingness to pay is 0. People would not want to pay for that. And that's something where I actually admire the fitness market, because people would invest in fitness, but then if you tell them something where they need to invest 30 or 50 euros into a better medication, they don't. Yeah, in all sorts of hocus pocus they do, you know, when, especially in the winter when you sort of see grippe medication and all of that, and then all of a sudden they're buying vitamins for crazy amounts of money. But at the same time, healthcare is something where in the German mindset it is, I've been paying for an insurance, and so I have the right to be reimbursed for everything, and if it's not reimbursed, it's useless. So that makes it very, very difficult to understand and for people to go into it. And then the next thing is that sales cycles are incredibly long. Because first of all, who is basically convincing a patient, if you have a B2P, as I say, so a business to patient business model, you need to convince the doctor to talk the patient into having it. That's how pharmaceuticals have worked over decades, basically. But then still there is a reimbursement. And to have a B2C or B2B directly, what I just said is not going to fly at all. So B2B makes most sense, and then you have in crazily long sales circles. If you sort of look at the sales cycles, if you look at it, a couple of very, very smart companies, for example, Smart Reporting, it's a company, they do radiology in Munich, I'm not going to elaborate more deeply. But from their first conversation and talking to a hospital into using their product until the first one used it was 18 months. That takes a lot of time and a lot of venture capital to be running for 18 months, to have a team running until the first customer comes on board. And in that time you have a valuation round and somebody says, where's your paying customer, where's your recurring revenues? You say, well, we're still waiting for XYZ to react. Then you sort of die along the way, being very pretty. That makes it very, very difficult. And at the same time, to be certified as a medical product until now was super difficult. Now, gladly, through the Healthcare Innovation Hub and Jens Spahn's new legislation, we have a fast track. So we basically have a method of getting products quicker into reimbursement to prove themselves to be useful in the medical sector and then quicker get into the market. So that's what makes it really difficult. You asked me what I'm looking for is team and a good understanding of what I just described, this type of market and how to get into it.
So industry expertise and multidisciplinary team. Let's go back on actually what you just mentioned, because I'm not sure everyone is aware of this Digitalversorgungsgesetz, which is in English the so-called Digital Supply Act, which is basically authorizing reimbursement of healthcare applications, so digital solutions. How is this going to affect the sector? Because we know it's super complex. You said there are multiple decision makers in the process of a sale. That's also why it takes so much time. So it's not purely a B2C model. So how do you think this will really improve the innovation, the digitalization of doctors, of hospitals, of medical professionals, but also the supply of healthcare apps or solutions?
So a very brief answer would be, we will see. Because until now...
But you never briefed, Dominik.
No, the thing is, we will have to see, because it was just passed last week. I think it's a great success that it was passed, because we're basically, if you look at the Bertelsmann research of digitization of countries in terms of health, we're in place 16 out of 17, and as you can imagine, 17 is not the winner. Yeah? And that's where we are right now, somewhere between France and Poland, so where we are geographically as well. But the thing is, this can push us actually into a completely new angle, because we're the first European country that actually has a law like that. And what it means to everybody, so if you're out there in the sector, if you can prove that your digital method is at least as useful as any other method or better, you can go into the fast track program and you will be approved within 90 days, 90, to be reimbursed by state insurance, or basically by the health insurance system in Germany. So that makes it very easy, or much easier, to actually tap these pools of money. That's a huge advantage. And what also comes with that, and what people tend to forget in the digital law that was just passed, is basically that insurance companies in Germany are now entitled to invest 2% of what they have, basically in their funds, into venture capital. And this all of a sudden is flooding these pools with 800 million euros of investment. And the combination of the two can make us the most digital. But why did I say we will see? Because I don't eat the cookie yet. I don't buy the story, because until I've seen it working, I'm still sort of suspectful, because it's a little bit like the Berlin airport, you know, it's a nice story, but it's not there yet, you know? And so we shall see what's actually going to happen. but at least I think it's putting the right signal. Minister Spahn has passed 18 laws in 18 months, so he's really doing something. And I think he's understood what the problems are. And with the Healthcare Innovation Hub, I need to mention it again, I think he's installed himself a troop and a group of people, team, of real experts. And they know how to change and know how to innovate, and I hope this is going to help you entrepreneurs, and it's going to help us as patients, and it's going to help digitally open doctors like me to more quickly be able to prescribe a digital solution instead of something else.
I think one of the key also additional areas of that Gesetz, of that law, is also data. And if I'm reading correctly, like electronic medical reports and also data collection for research purposes. How do you feel about data being shared of patients?
Well, that's a story where we could have our own conversation for
I know.
hours, but I'll try to make it short. The thing is the following: data protection is something that's only of interest to people who are healthy. The moment you have a disease and you're diagnosed with a disease, and you can have that basically genomically sequenced, your tumor or whatever underlying reason there is, and you can share that, you would be willing to share this information any minute just to find someone else who has the same disease and maybe found a cure. That's the first point. At the same time, I still think that it is our right to decide which data to share with whom. And that's why also Stefan and his team got into a relatively big shitstorm 10 days ago. And the thing is, you know, you need to really be aware of who we are selling our data to and who we open the data pool to. So I think that there is a valid reason for data protection. At the same time, we need to have a special approach to it. Because last week in the Zeit, the German newspaper, there was an article, can we actually afford not to share the data? Because if you're not willing to share the data, whether you're stuck in a traffic jam or not, that's basically your problem, you're not harming anyone. But if you're not sharing the data on your disease, you're actually harming someone who has the same disease. And that's sort of where there is a gap between. And I hope that the lines that were drawn in the new law, and that's something only a law specialist will be able to understand and actually interpret, were drawn at the right points. I have the feeling that they've tackled a couple of things, and the rest we will see.
Thanks a lot for this insights into legal perspective from a doctor.
Sorry to be so boring, but it's of importance to those who actually want to go into the startup scene on that sector and be reimbursed.
And this is one of the complexity of digital health or health tech, having different stakeholders involved into the mix. For more of the well-being and the FitTech startups, what are the challenges, Stefan, that you're facing on a day-to-day basis, or what are the roadblocks in starting up?
I think like they are not too specific to the health and fitness scene. Obviously, it's more related to the ecosystem you're in, and I think like our biggest daily challenges are access to talent, access to pre-seed and seed capital. In our case, we got lucky to have such a great round of business angels, but in general, speaking to my co-founder colleagues in the Munich scene, this is quite a topic. Yeah, so I think that's the biggest challenge, and then health and fitness related. So we're also talking to corporations and trying to bring in our products. So it's when it comes to mental health, there's still many companies where this is like lip service. So I asked them like, hey, is the mental health of your employees a thing for you? Like, yeah, it's a real thing. Like, and okay, so what measures do you have in place? It's like, yeah, like once a week we have a yoga class. Like, oh, okay, nice. So it's still a little bit of a lip service thing, but it's changing. Like 1 year ago when we just launched and I was speaking to companies, they were not like taking me seriously. And nowadays it's a whole different talk. It's like, okay, we know about all these products, like how is your product different to Headspace or to other products? So I think it's rapidly changing. So this also makes me confident that it will also be a great product on the B2B side.
And Thomas, do you see the same on the venture capital side? Do you see a lot more people investing? So you mentioned, Stefan, that you were lacking support on the seed, pre-Series A. do you see most of the investors actually waiting for, you know, product market fit and Series B? Where do you see people coming from the investment side?
So I think also, yeah, that's a tough question, but I think that, so I think product market fit in digital health for me, the learning was slightly different to other companies. I think, take the example of Kaya Health or others. You need to be medically validated. You need to run a clinical trial, which is already a pretty big hurdle to be able to be a digital solution. So I think for you to be able to do that, and as you know, Dominik mentioned, there's quite a long sales cycle to get all this. You need to raise a lot of money. So you get to product market fit by maybe having a clinical trial. You get to product market fit, a clinical trial that proves that your solution is actually improving the condition through your versus kind of taking a medicine. So for those things, there's a lot of money flowing into that. And I think that, you know, the Digital Supply Act, you know, I get paid to be optimistic. I think it's a great thing. I think it's going to push the sector. Yeah. I mean, Germany has been a laggard. That's true. Digital health as an industry has been a laggard. So I think I mentioned it at the outset, right? There was a McKinsey report that looked at digitization across all different industries. Healthcare was just behind public sector. Public sector is still paper, right? I mean,
so public sector was actually better than...
No, public sector is the worst.
Yeah.
Which is like, I mean, I just moved away from Munich and had to kind of deregister myself. It was completely paper-based here in Munich, still. So I think, you know, the fact that that's the only industry where healthcare beats everything else. So I think the Digital Supply Act is a great thing. We'll push more money into it. The fact that it's reimbursable was one of the biggest issues. Speaking to the company like Kaya Health again, from Munich, the fact that they weren't able to reimburse, doctors weren't able to kind of give them a reimbursement code, was one of the biggest hurdles to sell it. So I'm quite excited about all the potential that's coming through the DBG.
I'm actually, I just ask myself the questions when it comes to like the price for these health and fitness apps being reimbursed. If I look into like more on the fitness side, also like from my experience from Freeletics, like user training activity is highly different to the people that are paying for it than the people who are not paying for it. So it's a little bit like, hey, I'm in this super expensive gym, so I better go 2 times a week because otherwise it's not worth it. So I'm still thinking of like in terms of effectiveness of this whole law, like it would be exciting to see how user activity is kind of developing then over time if it's like for free, you know? Because it's nice to have everything for free, but in Germany there's also a little bit the mentality of, hey, if it's for free then it can't be any good. So I'm still, I'm excited to see that.
And I think there's a slight difference between here the digital health tech and the
100%,
fit
yes.
tech, where this is more based on an impulse, and
yeah.
as we discussed, kind of trying to do good to yourself without having the obligation, versus on the e-health or digital health prospect, having to because you have actually you have a disease, yes. Or you have an injury.
Just on that point, actually, I think on that question, I think that the gym memberships was one of the first perks that kind of this wave has created from companies. So when companies talk about, okay, doing something good for their employees in the health and wellness space, discounted gym memberships seems to be one of the first sectors that companies have gone into. So I think that you know, there's a lot of opportunity there. So Gym Pass, for instance, is a unicorn that did really well, kind of moving into the B2B space. Urban Sports Club, right? The biggest driver is when they realize that they're not selling to B2C, and the acquisitions that they're doing is B2B actually right now have been really driving kind of recurring revenue, which is interesting to us as an investor, because I think in the B2C space, as you mentioned, you know, people sign up for gyms in January, February, March, and then you know.
And this is where it's recalling our discussion, Stefan and Mindshine, your go-to-market strategy with coaching centers and universities and having more of a B2B approach.
Yeah, actually, we were trying out 3 approaches, like obviously B2C, where we're trying to build up a strong user brand, like we want to be a lifestyle brand and make mental fitness like actually a thing that's cool. So then we obviously thought like, hey, this is such a relevant product for companies, and to be quite honest, it's pretty tough to sell to companies. Sales cycles are crazy long, really crazy long, and we had a third hypothesis is that our product, like I mean, it's a personal growth app, is highly relevant or complementary to actually people who are working as coaches and trainers. And actually, this is quite an easy sell for us. And we are endorsing the in-house coaches and trainers at SAP. So this is for us like our Trojan horse to get inside these companies and kind of infiltrate this with coaches and trainers. So for us, this happens to be our go-to-market strategy, and especially for the US, which is a strategically super important market for us, where on the B2C side, user acquisition costs are even higher. This is like our go-to-market strategy for the US through healthcare practitioners.
So Dominik, digital for doctors. So like as a co-pilot, I think that was one of your phrases.
Well, I'm very pro-digital, of course. I mean, that's relatively obvious because I spend sort of my time being on a panel such as this and pushing all this, but I see, of course, a lot of fear. A lot of people actually fear. I have this slide that I tend to show when I give a speech and it says digital will replace the doctor. And then I say, oh, sorry, that's a wrong slide. It's actually going to assist. And then everybody's like, oh, God, that's what he said. Yeah, and it's really, and I'm like, how is it going to be replacing? And I tend to draw the comparison of the taxi app. You can still order a taxi cab through a phone. Who has done this in the last couple of months in this room? Called someone, okay, and called, no, not a phone pushing a button on an app, but called a centrale and then waiting for a couple of minutes and then sort of having someone who's barely good at German and then sort of driving your direction, you hope. I mean, that's something that's sort of out of vogue. You can
happens here at the reception.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. I know a lot of elderly people who still love that. Yeah, but it's still something, sort of from the perspective of the taxi drivers, you can still be without the app. You can still be driving around, you can still sort of try to find people on the streets and stand in front of restaurants, bars, clubs, whatever, and hope for your luck. But you're going to have more empty rides, you're going to be less efficient, and you're going to have sort of less money in your pocket at the end of the day. And I think that's going to be the same with the doctors. If you're not digital, the digital doctor will overtake you. And I mean, basically, how is it happening? I always tend to say we're now at 4.0, but I've been doing digital medicine 2.0 for a long time. So how does that work? Somebody calls me and says, look, it's Friday afternoon, I need a prescription for ABC. I'm going on vacation tomorrow morning. So what I do is I take out my prescription on a piece of paper, I write out the prescription, I take a picture, I send it to them. Careful. Illegal. Illegal. Not barely legal, but illegal. And B, the pharmacy doesn't need to follow it. But how is reality working? It works. Period. And it makes a difference if you're going on a 2 or 3 week vacation and your girlfriend has the pill or not. It's a huge difference, as most of you would figure. And that's basically, I'm not talking sort of bullshit, but this is how reality happens. And I would also like to elaborate one more thing. There's 2 exceptions if you're thinking about entering the market. Where is a huge willingness to pay in terms of healthcare out of the pocket?
Where there's no healthcare system?
Yes, but in Germany? Who of you has a child? A baby? What's your willingness to pay if the baby has a fever on the weekend to reach somebody who has a clue? Instead of sitting in an emergency room with 1,000 other sick children, or maybe where there's not even a child doctor, your willingness to pay is immensely high, on average, if you have the funds. And the other is a great company that just launched and that is proving that this works. It's called Dr. Sam, who has a pet, a dog. If your dog is unhealthy, you're going to be willing to spend crazy amounts. Dogs replace children, dogs replace, psychotherapists, dogs replace a lot. So do cats, by the way, yeah? And so people are hugely willing to pay, and that's all of a sudden where digital health happens, and where you see that this is actually going into the market. So there's an openness for that. And then as a last aspect, you will be super surprised who uses it. I've seen 70-year-old patients, 70 plus, and they've booked online. And I'm like, oh yeah, your son or daughter did that. And they were looking at me like, no, the fuck, I mean, I've been booking taxis for the last 10 years online. What's your problem? Look, yeah, don't insult me. And I'm serious on that. So really, you would be surprised on who uses online services. Don't underestimate those silver surfers. If your parents are on WhatsApp, there's a high chance that they are smarter on using a couple of the functionalities than we are, because they have a lot of time. Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, and that's where I'm saying there is a willingness on strange aspects, and what I say is just give it a try. You can off-sign yourself from all these online services as a doctor. I always ask them, how long is the run rate of all that? Then I say, I'll try it for 3 months, and if I don't like it, I'm signing off after 30 days. I put a mark into my calendar. Do I sign up these digital things? No, because they all work, and people love it. So I think in the end, as going back to the taxi app, the customer is going to drive the doctor on what he likes and what he's going to use on an everyday basis. That's my hope for all of you entrepreneurs and for all of us as patients and for also our interaction.
So Stefan, go to the coaches. That's your next go-to-market. Let's try to wrap it up a little bit and get all the key insights throughout this session. So my last few questions will be about which type of advice you would like to give to the young generation of entrepreneurs who are launching their startups to avoid the mistakes. One per panelist. The advice.
I would say don't overestimate your market potential.
Thank you.
I don't think it's good to avoid mistakes. I think the point is that what you learn from them. And I would say, like, be in the room where all people apart from you are smarter than yourself. And FitTech Summit is a good place to start with.
Because they're fitter than you.
Definitely.
Not you, but the average founder.
I think on the digital health side, the biggest advice is really think about who the payer is. I think that's the most important thing, because I think we've realized with some startups which have struggled to scale is because they haven't figured out that they're not selling to kind of the customer. It's going to be very difficult, but they're selling to maybe the doctors and insurers as the gatekeeper. So figuring out who exactly is monetizing this for you.
I think I've learned from a Bavarian politician. He compared Estonia to Germany, and he said, in Germany we're overdoing it. The electronic medical card, we've pushed 1.7 billion euros into it, and it's still not there. It's not running. Estonia has it. So what did they do? They constructed a bicycle, which is probably ugly and not running super well, but it's running. We're trying to construct the perfect Mercedes-Benz, and we're not trying to push it out of the garage because it could be raining. And that's our problem. So I say what the sports company back in the old did, and that's how I'm throwing the arc towards fitness. Nike said, just do it. Do it. Go out, make the failure, suffer, and rearrange your business model. Most startups that I've seen came up with some sort of an idea, and then they redid it while they were starting to run. And in the beginning you have that chance, and you will come up with a little bit of a different business model, a little bit of a different angle, and you will develop your idea. So just do it.
Iterate. What's your wish for Munich or Germany in general?
Okay, I think my biggest wish would be that we can be competitive in a global market when it comes to letting employees participate in the company. I think that's a huge drawback for German startups and companies. I'm speaking of virtual shares or employee stock option programs. We have a huge drawback on the tax side here. So I think that would be a good start. And I think that's one of my biggest wishes.
I think we definitely need more a better nation branding, because Germany, in Europe, Germany is the country with most fitness users. We're gonna have 19 million users of fitness apps by 2023, and we have lots of people who go to the gyms. But if I look at that from the perspective of the FitTech Summit, we got a lot of international guests, and they come to Munich and then they say, wow, that's quite a nice city. But they didn't have this narrative in their heads before. And I think that might be also a good idea, which would help us to get more investors and more corporates and more international businesses to come to Munich, to come to Bavaria or to Germany. Just to share one story, we got 3, because you can really make business here. We got 20 American guys who came from the States to speak or just to be present at the FitTech Summit. And one of them said, well, I'm in Washington, D.C., and I have all my network across the States, and for me, I just don't care if I fly 6 hours to San Francisco or 8 hours to Munich, you know. And there they went, like, there were 20 people from, like, the founder of Strava, or these guys from Sweatworks, which is one of the biggest digital agencies for fitness, or Spartan Race, and they just went to dinner and enjoyed the good food. And what came out of this dinner was, like, 3 business ideas and 3 business cooperations, like including Spartan Race competitions now running in the Strava app. No, and so these are the stories we're going to share way more, as well as to create a common narrative for Germany not being like laggard and, you know, like sleeping through all the latest innovations and stuff, but having like the right spirit and the right food, the right environment to do sports, and also the right environment for people to come together and to do business here, a part of their, you know, out of their normal settings where they get bored or just don't have time to connect. Was it too much?
No, branding. International branding.
Go first.
Well, what I would say is basically, I think we're on a perfect track. What I see here, a lot of inspiration, a lot of great minds. And I would like to say it as a comparison between Berlin and Munich. Munich is very easy. It's a little less conversation, a lot of more action. So it's actually happening, and not everybody's talking about it, because we don't spend time sort of feeling very cool and being super posh and growing a bear, but we actually do it. That's why I think we're on a good pathway, with more venture capital pouring from all over the place, which is here in the right direction. I think we're on a very, very good pathway, and it's going to develop better and better.
Yeah, no, I think I would agree with those, and I think the one wish that I would have is that corporates, you know, put more budget towards it, and it's not just like a small employee perk and put their money where their mouth is. Because, as you mentioned, I mean, we had this. I had a call today actually about this, and all the corporates are talking about wellness and mental health, and that being one of the biggest issues that they face in their employees, burnouts. But then they don't actually put the budget there. So I hope that, you know, as kind of they set bigger budgets, they realize the indirect impact and the direct impact of, you know, investing in kind of mental health apps and fitness and wellness and digital health. So I hope that budgets will grow.
Let's hope. Thank you so much for all your insights, guys. I have a lot of other questions, but I think we should open the floor a little bit and see if our audience wants to jump in and have some questions. I'm happy to give the mic.